By the time the toasts were done and the cake had been cut, I was the one standing near the kitchen sink, refilling the ice bucket while Sadie's grandmother asked me, again, whether I was planning to make things official before I turned 30. I was 28. She had been asking since 26. "Mrs. Calloway, I'm just here for the pasta," I said. She pointed a dessert fork at me. "You're here every year. The pasta gets better every year." She gave me the look that old women give young men who are being deliberately stupid, and then she walked back to the living room, satisfied with nothing I had said. That was how it went at the Vance family's summer reunion. I was always there. Not as a date, not as a boyfriend, not as anyone with a formal title, just as the guy who had been Sadie's closest friend for 7 years and somehow ended up knowing where they kept the extra napkins. Sadie Vance. That was the whole problem, really. She was across the room right now, laughing at something her uncle had said, wearing a yellow sundress that made the whole backyard look like it had tried and failed to compete with her. Her hair was down. She had been up since 6 this morning, helping her mom set up tables and string lights and carry trays of food from the garage, and she still looked like she had just arrived, somewhere worth arriving to. I looked away and went back to the ice. Her family rented the same lake house in Michigan every year for the 4th of July weekend. Big back deck, a dock that was slightly uneven, a kitchen that was always full of people, regardless of the time. I had come the first time because Sadie had said she needed someone sane to drive 4 hours with her. And I had come every year after that, because no one had ever told me to stop. At some point, her mom started texting me directly to confirm I was coming. Her cousin Patrick found me at the ice bucket. He was 22, just finished his junior year at Michigan State, and had the specific energy of someone who had found a beer earlier than he should have. "You're doing the thing again," he said. "I'm filling the ice bucket." You're filling the ice bucket and watching my cousin from across the room. I'm filling the ice bucket and being helpful. Patrick leaned against the counter with the confidence of a man who had nothing to lose. "My grandfather has money on September. My mom picked Valentine's Day. I personally think it happens before this weekend is over." "Nothing is happening this weekend. That's what you said last year." "Nothing happened last year either." He shrugged like that was irrelevant. "Scale of 1 to 10. How much does it bother you when she talks about guys she's seeing?" "I don't have a number for that, Obli. That's a 10. I picked up the ice bucket and walked away from him. The thing about Sadie was that she had been part of my regular life for so long that I had stopped knowing how to classify it. We had met at work, both of us at the same marketing agency in Chicago, her on the creative side, me on the account side, and we had gotten close fast the way you do when you spend 50 hours a week in the same building and discover that the other person has the exact same opinions about bad client feedback and good sandwiches. We had done every low-stakes thing 2 people can do together. Lunch spots, weekend errands, a long stretch where we were both watching the same show and texted commentary back and forth in real time. I had helped her move once. She had helped me pick out furniture for my new place, then complained about my choices for 3 months and eventually replaced most of them with better ones. I had known, somewhere in the middle of all that my feelings had shifted into something different. I had known it the way you know your keys are in your coat pocket, without having to check, without having to think. I just knew, and I had spent a very long time deciding that knowing was enough, and that doing anything about it would just make something good fall apart. So I kept showing up to the lake house, filled the ice bucket, laughed at the right moments, drove 4 hours each way, and pretended that was completely normal. Sadie appeared beside me when I set the bucket back down. "My grandmother got to you," she said. "She got to me twice. I'm sorry. She's been in a romantic mood all weekend." She reached past me and pulled a bottle of water from the cooler. How are you still functional after that drive? I stopped at a gas station and got one of those terrible energy drinks you hate. Which one? The green one. She made a face. That's the worst one. I know. That's how tired I was. She laughed. She had this laugh that started small and then arrived fully, like it always surprised her a little. She touched my arm briefly when she did it, just 2 fingers against my forearm like a reflex, and then, she was already moving, because someone across the deck needed her for something. That was the thing about Sadie at family events. She was always moving. No, she was the one who found the chairs for the people who needed to sit. Remembered which aunt was vegetarian. Noticed when the music got too loud, checked on her mom without being asked. She ran on logistics and other people's comfort, and by the time the actual party was going well, she was the reason it was going well and no one had noticed. I noticed. I always noticed. By 9 o'clock, the older relatives had started clearing out. Cars reversed down the gravel driveway. The dock crowd thinned. What was left was a smaller, younger version of the party. Sadie's cousin Nadia on her phone, in one of the Adirondack chairs. Patrick trying to convince someone to go night swimming. And Sadie's older brother Weston, sitting on the porch steps, with 2 paper plates of food balanced, on his knees, like he had fully committed to never standing again. I was helping stack some of the plastic chairs when Sadie came out with 2 beers and handed me one. "Stack those tomorrow," she said. "I'm almost done." "You're always almost done with something helpful." She sat down on the porch railing and looked out at the dark water. The lake house was quiet on this side of the deck now. The string lights overhead were doing their warm yellow thing. "Sit down for 5 minutes." I sat on the step below the railing, which put the back of my head somewhere near her knee. "This was a good one," she said. "Your dad's speech was good. He practiced it." She smiled. "He wrote it out on paper and practiced it in the bathroom 3 times. Mom told me, that's the most human thing I've ever heard about your dad. He's very human. He just hides it." She looked down at me for a second. "You gave him good material, you know. When you told that story about the time you helped him fix the dock, and it immediately got worse. I didn't fix the dock. I made a very confident series of wrong decisions about the dock. He loves telling that story, Abby, because it makes him look better by comparison." She laughed again. I stared at the water and tried to remember that the evening was almost over, and I had 4 hours of highway ahead of me tomorrow, and none of this required me to feel things I had already decided not to feel. Then, Weston appeared at the bottom of the steps. He looked at Sadie, then at me, then at the beers, then back at Sadie with an expression I didn't fully catch. "You know," he said, "I'm gonna go check on Patrick before he convinces someone to do something the homeowners association would hear about." "Probably smart," Sadie said. Weston pointed at me on his way past, not in a threatening way, more in the way that someone points at something they are simply noting the existence of. Then, he was gone. For about 20 seconds, neither of us said anything. "He's not subtle," Sadie said finally. "Your whole family isn't subtle. They're very comfortable with our friendship. That's one word for it." She was quiet after that. Not awkward quiet. Just still. I heard the water moving against the dock. Somewhere down the shore someone had a bonfire going, and the faint smell of wood smoke came across. Then her phone buzzed on the railing. She picked it up, looked at it, made a small tight sound that I associated with things she didn't want to deal with. "Work? Not exactly." She set it face down. "The guy I went on 2 dates with last month apparently wants to clarify the situation." "What's the situation?" "That's what he wants to clarify." She picked up her beer. "It's fine. It can wait until Monday. You've said that about 3 different people in the last year." She glanced down at me. "What does that mean?" "Nothing. I'm just noting a pattern." "A pattern of what?" "I should have let it go." I had let it go 50 times before. The dock, the drive home, Tuesday lunch, Any number of moments where I had been standing right at the edge of something and had just decided quietly to step back. A pattern of things not getting past 2 months, I said. Sadie looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. That's a very neutral way to put it, she said. I'm trying to be neutral. Why? I didn't have a good answer for that. I stared at the water. Sadie stayed on the railing above me, not moving. You're not usually neutral, she said. I'm neutral about some things. Not about things that matter. That landed in a strange way. I turned the beer bottle in my hands and thought about Patrick and his timeline and Weston, pointing at me on his way past, and Sadie's grandmother with the dessert fork. I just think, I started, then stopped. You just think what? Nothing. Forget it. You don't start sentences, and then stop. That's not a thing you do. She set her beer down on the railing. Say the actual thing. I leaned forward with my elbows on my knees. I think you keep looking for a reason it won't work, I said, with people you date. And I think you find the reason pretty fast because you already know what you want, and none of them are it. The night got very quiet, not because anything stopped. The bonfire down the shore was still going. The dock was still creaking. Nadia was still on her phone somewhere. But the specific space between me and Sadie went quiet in a way that made everything else seem far away. That's specific, Sadie said. Yeah. What do I want? I didn't answer. She knew I wasn't going to answer that. I was still being careful. I had been careful for 7 years, and I was not going to stop being careful in 5 seconds on a porch step. But she was quiet now in a different way. Not waiting for me to fill it. Just sitting with it. Then footsteps. And Nadia appeared around the corner of the porch, with a bag of chips and no concept of timing. Oh, she said, looking at us. Am I interrupting something? No, we said, at approximately the same time. Nadia looked between us with the expression of someone who absolutely did not believe that. Okay, she said, in the tone of someone who was going to have opinions about this later. She sat down in one of the chairs at the end of the porch, still close enough to hear everything, opened the chips. Sadie picked her beer back up. I sat back against the railing post. The moment, whatever it had been, folded itself up and went somewhere. We stayed outside another hour. The conversation moved to easier ground. Patrick eventually came back from the water, with wet shoes and a story about a fish that no one believed. Weston brought out leftover food. It was good. It was the kind of night that felt like something without being definable, and by the time I went to bed, in the small upstairs room that had been, I had convinced myself I had not actually said very much. In the morning, the house was slow. Sadie's mom made a full breakfast, which was the tradition. Eggs, toast, fruit, coffee in the big thermos. Everyone sitting around the long table for as long as the food held out. Her dad read something on his phone. Weston and Patrick argued about something sports-related. Nadia was quiet in the particular way of someone who had slept fine, but was taking a few hours to come back online. Sadie sat across from me. We were normal. She passed me the coffee before I asked. I gave her the last of the strawberries, because she always wanted the strawberries. It was fine. It was exactly what it had always been, and that was either comforting or the whole problem, depending on how I was holding it. After breakfast, most people drifted. Her parents went for a walk down the road. Weston drove into town for something. Patrick took a kayak out alone, which he did when he needed to reset. Nadia was on the porch with a book. I was in the kitchen with a dish towel, drying the pan her mom had asked me to dry, when Sadie came back in from the back door with her sandals in her hand. She stopped when she saw me. Not a surprised stop. More like she had been thinking about something on the walk back from the dock, and she was still in the middle of it. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. She put her sandals down near the door. She looked at me for a moment like she was deciding exactly how to land the sentence. What you said last night, she said. About me knowing what I want. I didn't say you knew what you want. I said you weren't finding it. That implies I know what I'm looking for, doesn't it? She folded her arms, unfolded them, picked up her sandals again, then set them back down. I had known her long enough to read that as someone who was not nervous often, but was nervous now. Nadia told me something this morning, she said. I waited. She said she came around the corner last night, and the two of us looked like we were in the middle of something she wasn't supposed to see. Sadie looked at me steadily. I told her she was reading into it. And she said I was the one reading into it. She said, and this is a direct quote, Sadie, the man has been driving 4 hours to your family's lake house for 3 years. He dries your mom's pans. He fixed the dock wrong on purpose, so your dad would feel useful. He is not here for the pasta. The kitchen went still. The refrigerator somewhere hummed. I heard a boat somewhere out on the water, and the dish towel in my hand was dry, but I kept holding it. She made a good point about the pasta, I said. The pasta is actually very good. It really is. Sadie didn't smile at that. She was watching me with the careful expression she got when she was working something out and didn't want to make a mistake. Was she wrong? She asked. I set the dish towel on the counter. I had a clear exit from the question if I wanted it. A laugh, a deflection. Something about how Nadia was just looking for drama on a slow morning. I had used variations of that for years. No, I said. Sadie exhaled. Not loudly. Just a small, controlled breath, like something she had been holding had shifted. How long? She asked. A while. How long is a while? I looked at the window. The water was bright in the morning sun. Her mom had put wildflowers in a mason jar on the sill, red and yellow, and they were leaning slightly toward the glass. Probably the first winter, I said. There was a week in January where you were sick, and you called me because you didn't want to ask anyone to go to the pharmacy for you, but you also couldn't drive. I went. You were sitting on your couch in this enormous sweater, looking completely miserable, and you said, I owe you approximately for forever, and I remember driving home thinking that forever sounded fine with me. I paused. That was the winter after we met. Sadie's face did something that I could not entirely read. Not surprise. Something more like recognition arriving from a direction she hadn't expected. Why didn't you say anything? She asked. Because you were my best friend. And I didn't know how you felt. And the version of things we already had was so good that saying something and getting it wrong felt like burning something down that took years to build. I looked at her. Why didn't you? She was quiet for a moment. The same reason, she said. Exactly the same reason, which I realize sounds like a line but is actually just embarrassingly true. What do you mean? She leaned against the counter and looked at the ceiling for a second, like she was deciding how honest to be. Nadia wasn't entirely wrong, she said. About me knowing what I want. I do know. I've known for a while, and every time I go on a date with someone, I am aware, not always immediately, but pretty quickly, that it doesn't feel like this. She gestured between us with one hand. It doesn't feel easy the way this does. It doesn't feel like someone already knows all the shorthand. I don't have to explain why a text bothered me, or why a certain thing at work matters. It's just, I already have the version I want to compare things to, and nothing compares. My chest was doing something complicated. Sadie. I know. She looked at me. I know that's not a small thing to say, no, and I know the timing is fine. I was going to say weird. The timing is fine, I said again. It's a Saturday morning in Michigan and your mom put wildflowers on the windowsill, and I've been driving 4 hours here for 3 years. The timing is fine. Something in her face loosened. I was scared, she said, quieter. I kept thinking, if I say this out loud and it goes wrong, I don't just lose someone I like, I lose you. The person I call when I get bad news. The person who remembered that I hate the green energy drinks, but bought me one anyway. That one time, because it was the only caffeine option at the airport at 5 in the morning. And you thought that was a reasonable exception. I still maintain it was a reasonable exception. It was not a reasonable exception. You drank the whole thing. I was desperate. But she was almost smiling now. Almost. I didn't want to risk any of that. So I did nothing. And then you date someone for a month and nothing comes of it. And I would notice. And I would feel this thing I didn't want to name, and I would think, okay, well, that's useful information. And then I would go on a date myself and spend the whole time wishing the conversation felt like ours. I stood there in her family's kitchen with morning light coming through the window and wildflowers in a mason jar and the faint sound of Patrick's kayak bumping back against the dock. I kept convincing myself that being your best friend was the thing. I said that it was enough, that staying in the lane meant I was being mature and protecting something real. I looked at her. Turns out, I was just being afraid and calling it noble. Sadie gave a small, tired laugh. We're very good at that, apparently. Protecting the same thing from opposite sides. Without telling each other, like complete idiots. Very well-meaning idiots. She laughed at that, a real one, the kind that arrived fully, and I felt it the way I always felt it. Somewhere behind my ribs. Then there were footsteps in the hallway and Nadia came through the kitchen doorway holding her book, stopped completely, looked at both of us, and turned around. Nope, she said from the hallway. I was never here. Carry on. Nadia, Sadie said. I literally just came in for water. Her voice was already retreating. I will get it from a distant water source. There are several in this house. Sadie closed her eyes for a second. I said, she's going to be extremely proud of herself. She's going to be unbearable about it. She earned it a little. She absolutely did not earn it. She did the thing last night. She came in and then left on purpose. She came in for chips, and then she told you this morning. Sadie opened her eyes. That's fine. That's fair. She pushed her hair back from her face. She's still going to be insufferable about this. Probably forever, possibly. We were both quiet for a second. The kitchen settled around us, warm and familiar, all the small details I had memorized over 3 years without deciding to. The coffee stain on the edge of the wooden cutting board, the way the cabinet over the stove was slightly warped and always swung back, open. The hook near the door, where Sadie's mom kept a spare key that literally everyone in the family knew about. Sadie looked at me with an expression that I had seen from her before. That particular look she got when she was past deciding and had moved into doing. So, she said. So, what happens now? I'd like to take you to dinner, I said. Not here. Not at a family event where your grandmother is watching. An actual dinner, on purpose, just the two of us, where you know I'm there because I want to be there, and not because your mom texted me. She's going to keep texting you. I know. I want to be there for both reasons. The corner of her mouth moved. When we go back to Chicago, I said. Next weekend. I was thinking next weekend. That's very soon. I have been patient for 7 years. I think I have used up my patience. She laughed, and then she stepped forward, and I did what I had been not doing for a very long time. I met her halfway. It was not dramatic. There were no string lights involved. The wildflowers were there, and the sound of the lake was there, and somewhere in the house Nadia was definitely listening from around a corner. But the moment itself was simple and clear, and much warmer than I had expected, which probably said something about the fact that I had been imagining it for years, and reality was still better. When we stepped back, Sadie looked at me with that particular expression she had when she had solved something she had been working on for too long. 7 years, she said. 7 years. We're slow. We're thorough. She shook her head. We're slow. I didn't argue. She was right. We had taken the long way around something that was always going to end up here, and I could not find it in me to be sorry about any of it, because every part of the long way had been real, and ours, and I wouldn't have traded any Tuesday lunch or airport run, or 4-hour drive to Michigan for a shortcut. Nadia told Patrick within the hour. Patrick texted Weston. Weston said he was not surprised in a way that suggested he had been waiting for years. Sadie's dad came back from his walk, listened to his wife explain what had happened in the kitchen, and said, with great satisfaction, that he was changing his bet to the Labor Day, and he did not care that the event had already occurred. Her grandmother found me before dinner. Well, she said, with the dessert fork again, finally. I didn't have anything better than that, so I just agreed. Sadie and I went on that dinner the following Saturday. Then, another. Then, what became a standing thing on Friday nights, which slowly absorbed our existing standing things, until the categories didn't fully separate anymore. The shorthand we had always had just shifted register slightly. A little more open, a little less careful. The same two people who had always known each other now, knowing each other in a way neither of us had to translate. Her mom still texts me to confirm. I'm coming to the lake house. I always am.